This week we're going to spend some time talking about the subject of mental agreements. In 2 Corinthians 10, verse 4, it talks about the weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds, and strongholds are defined as arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. So a mental agreement is a stronghold. And strongholds are words or mental agreements that we use in our mind that are against the knowledge of God. You can have good mental agreements and you can have bad mental agreements. As we look at the subject of mental agreements, we see that we are able to commit our mind with strength and determination. Mental agreements can be subtle or bold, hidden, or clearly evident. I believe that as we address this little understood subject of mental agreements, that you will begin to see the evidence of ways that you use your mind to create both positive and negative mental agreements. So what is a mental agreement? It is a committing of the mind with determination. It is words that the mind accepts and agrees with. So when you say something in your mind that you agree with, that is a mental agreement. Now, examples of mental agreements are vows, curses, covenants, and general agreements that you make. The issue is that in each case, words are used. So in the process of this inner healing work that we're talking about, it's about the mind, it's about words, it's about the power that these words have to work either positively or destructively. Now the first type of mental agreement that I'd like to talk about is the vow. And a vow is a mental agreement that you have created for yourself. You're the one who creates the words. You're the one who says, I agree with myself that, and then the words that follow. And an agreement may be like a New Year's resolution, where at the end of the year you say, I make a vow that I'm going to exercise 3 times a week, every week for the next year. That's a vow. And that sounds like a good vow. Other vows are words that are against the knowledge of God. When God says, love your enemy, we are to love our neighbor. And then if we make a vow to never invite a person over to a dinner because they've never responded to our having them over for dinner previously, then we're really trying to punish them. We're trying to hurt them. And so that vow says, if they don't reciprocate, I'm never going to invite that person back to dinner again. That's a vow. And so we create these words ourselves and we live out of these words, but they have potentially, if they're negative, a negative destructive power in our life. Examples of vows are found in marriages. They call them marriage vows. And everyone knows and talks about that. But it's subtle when you don't talk to someone, but you make a conclusion in your mind about an individual and you say, that person has hurt me and I'm going to cut them out of my life and I'm never going to have anything to do with them again. That would be a destructive vow. That's not just a boundary, that's a vow. Now, a second type of mental agreement is a curse. And a curse is words that are created by other people and they speak those words to you and then you receive them. So when an individual in your life says, you are never going to amount to anything, if you don't receive those words, that curse doesn't land. And that doesn't become a mental agreement. It only becomes a mental agreement when you say to yourself, you hear the words, and then you say, well, my life is never going to amount to anything, or I'm never going to live up to the expectations of that person. And I believe that, and I accept those words, then that agreement with those words has power. The good news is that if someone speaks a curse onto your life, and you have the ability to say, no, I don't accept those words, and you don't allow those words to land, then you don't come into agreement with those words, and then that curse has no power. So a lot of people fear curses because they think it's somebody else doing something to you. But really, curses have to be received to have power, and you have to come into agreement with them for them to have power. Another type of mental agreement is the covenant. A covenant is when two people come together and they make an agreement. Now, in youth, when two boys cut their fingers and they mingle their blood and they say, I covenant to become your blood brother, and we will be like brothers from here on in, blood brothers. That is a covenant. There are many situations in Africa where blood ceremonies are done and covenants are created through that type of agreement. There are covenants that are made in organizations, Freemasonry, where they have secret ceremonies, and you are covenanting to that organization through words and prayers that you say in those ceremonies. Any covenant that is an agreement against the truth of God is a negative covenant, and it has power. How do you deal with any of these mental agreements? The way you address them is you first of all say, I am consciously aware now of this mental agreement. I choose with my will to no longer live under the power of this agreement, and so I choose to renounce it. And so it's in the renunciation of the mental agreement that it is broken. And then what you do is you replace the negative mental agreement with a new positive mental agreement. And what you do is you go to the Lord and you say, Lord, I am renouncing this, but what is it that you want me to come into agreement with? What is the new agreement that you want me to have in my mind? And as you listen to that, that's what you then set your mind to with determination and conviction. When there's a lie needs to be replaced with truth. When there's a negative mental agreement, it needs to be replaced with a positive mental agreement or a blessing. A blessing is another way of talking about a positive mental agreement. When someone, my father comes and he places his hand on my shoulder and says, Alf, I want you to know that God is pleased with you and He is blessing you into your manhood and He's blessing you into your career as a counselor. As I receive that blessing, I am agreeing with it. And I gain a power that comes from the power of the blessing, which is a mental agreement. And so it's much better to be living with blessings than it is with these negative mental agreements in our life. So what I'd like you to do today is to do an inventory of your life and your thought processes and explore, are there ways that you are holding mental agreements? Ask Jesus to reveal, with the help of the Holy Spirit, what ways you have created convictions and mental agreements in your mind that you need to renounce. There's a prayer of renunciation in your workbook, and you can sit down with the Lord and work through that prayer today in your small group.